All right, let's finish going over the inference with two proportions. So on the previous video, on day 5, you had done the two phantoms. So this was the phantoms about Genio and um, store brand packages of contamination. And just to refresh your memory, we did decide that we had evidence that the proportion of Genio packages contaminated is significantly less than the proportion of store brand packages that were contaminated. So I did not make you restate the problem or the parameter or the assumptions. They were the same. And just a reminder that I know which way the calculator subtracted because I put my Jenny O information in first and I put my store brand information in second, and the calculator does P1 minus P2. So make sure you wrote the way you subtract. This, by the way, was a two proportion Z interval. And then here is the interval that it gave me. So now I want to interpret that. So I am 95% confident that the true proportion of Genio packages that are contaminated with Campylobacter is between, okay, and say it from least to greatest, and don't say it with a negative percent because that doesn't make sense in layman's terms. Say, oh, it's negative 1.28%. No. So it's between 1.28% and 24% lower than. So the Genio was lower than, that much lower than the proportion of store brand packages contaminated with the Campylobacter. Now, again, notice I do not write the negatives or the, I don't write negative percentage because that doesn't make sense. And also notice that I kind of had to change the order because I wrote them from least to greatest. That would what would make sense. Now, in this case, then we also talk about the significance of 0 being in there or not. So since 0 is not in there, then this is evidence of a significant difference in that proportion of Genio and store brand packages that are contaminated. Okay, so we have evidence of a difference. Now, again, remember that I always choose to do my information in terms of the first one. So since these are negative, I know that the Jenny O is lower than the store brand. Okay, if they were positive, then the Jenny O would be higher than. All right, then you did this phantoms on the difference in the opinions, the difference in the proportion of men and women who think men are intelligent, and we had not found a difference. There, we did not have evidence of a significant difference in that proportion. So here was our phantom, or our interval to estimate what that difference is, a two proportion Z interval. I put the men information in first, the women information in second. That's why I wrote that I did P of M minus P of W. And look at this interval. It contains it has a negative up to a positive. So of course, we're also interested in the fact that there is 0 in there. So I'm 94% confident that the true difference between the proportion of men and women who think men can be described as intelligent is between 1.3% lower for the men up to 9.8% higher for the men. So see, I like to do it I like to do my statement. I always just do it in terms of the first one, the first variable there, parameter, because I know if it's negative, then that is the men being lower. If it's positive, then that's the men being higher than the women. Now, you could have said it different ways. You could have said 1.3% higher for the women to 9.18% higher for the men. Anyway, there's different ways you can do that. But again, it was important to note that 0 is not in that interval. So this further suggests that there is not evidence of a significant difference in those opinions about the intelligence of men. Okay. So then we came to some conclusions. Practice writing those conclusions. This page was writing conclusions on tests. And so here we had this with a p-value of this. So that p-value is less than alpha, so we rejected the null and we concluded that there is a significant difference, that the proportion of Alito residences who have a swimming pool is greater than the proportion of Hudson Oaks residences who have a swimming pool. And here is one where we failed to reject it. And so we do not have evidence to suggest that the proportion of Alito residents who have a swimming pool is greater than the proportion of Hudson Oaks ones. Okay. But then here is really the trickier ones. The intervals are the trickier conclusions. So this is about the recycling for Fort Worth residences and Alito residences. So see, we know from this how the subtraction is done. And I like to do things in terms of the first one, and they're negative. So I can see Fort Worth is lower than Alito the entire time. So I'm 95% confident that the proportion of Fort Worth residences who recycle is between 9% and 15% lower than the proportion of Alito residences who recycle, and 0 is not in there. So this is evidence of a difference between the recycling rates of Fort Worth and Alito. Here is the very, very interesting one that is typically the harder one to word. We have a negative percent up to a positive percent, so we need to address how to deal with that in correct communication terms. So I'm 90% confident that the true proportion of Fort Worth residences who recycle is between 5.2% lower and 8.5% higher than the true proportion of Alito residences who recycle. So, see, Fort Worth could be less than, or Fort Worth could be higher than. So, what's happening is this: since 0 is not in the since 0 is in that interval, there could be no difference. So, again, think that we are saying there is no evidence of a difference. No evidence of a difference. Okay? All right. So now, let's see what's next. Got the multiple choice questions. So here we have this interval, this situation comparing the satisfaction, investigating the satisfaction with the electricity outages. You can tell that I made this problem during that week of school that we were off for Snowmageddon 2021. Okay, so looky here, they tell us how they subtracted. They did the company compare power to the save on power. Okay, so they subtracted in that way. And if I make this interval, it's from negative 0.16 to positive 0.08. So there is, so compare could be 16% lower to 18% higher than the save on. And what's important? 0 is in the interval. So we do not have no evidence of a difference. So so these right here, they did not interpret the actual interval with the negative 16 and the positive 8. So that's why those were out. Then of the 3 remaining ones, this one, if you read carefully, just talked about the proportion of customers of compare and save on. It doesn't talk about the difference between them. So we're now down to B and C. And they are almost identical in what they say, with the exception of if there is evidence of a difference or not. So again, because 0 is in there, there does not appear to be evidence of a significant difference. So that's, I didn't even answer the question. Okay, so that's what makes B the answer to that question. All right. So here you were just checking out the difference between these things. So we were identifying the formula. And again, the formula for interval. You know that the formula for the interval, and this is on the formula chart, they say statistic and then the plus or minus, the plus or minus the critical value. And so that's what's happening here on this problem, times that standard error of a statistic. And so remember that it is called standard error of the statistic because it's the standard deviation made with p hats instead of true p's. Okay, so don't let that word standard error confuse you. But anyway, so the statistic is the difference between them because we're wanting to estimate the difference between them. So here's how it would do the formula. Here's the plus and minus. And then if we looked at the formula chart in our notes on page, I think 25 or 26, I think 26 maybe, maybe even 27. But this is then the formula for two proportions standard deviation. And then, of course, to find this critical value, to find the confidence level that was associated with this, see, they had 98%. Did they tell you to be 98% confident in here? Where does it say that? Oh, right here, hidden. 98% confident, and that's what's in the middle. So I inverse normed one tail. That's how I knew it was the 2.326. We actually kind of went backwards on that yesterday during the notes. Okay, I think that is all of the problems. And so now you're going to do the warm-up. See, we're done with the learning in this unit, this entire 7B unit. So you're going to do the warm-up. And then after that, we'll be reviewing for the test on all of our inference that we've learned so far. All right. So good luck to you on your warm up.